Okay, sometimes because of poor running off idle, you have to remove the fuel screw to check the condition of the O-ring and to clean out that passage. Before you remove the fuel screw, you're going to want to turn it in all the way until it lightly seats to see how far it's out currently. On mine, it's 1 3/4, 1 1/2 turns in. So now I know it's 100 or 1 1/2 turns in. I'm going to go ahead and remove this fuel screw. And when this thing comes out, you should have the screw, a spring, a washer, and an O-ring. If they don't come out, dump them out if you can. Okay, there's the spring. There's the O-ring, or the washer, and the O-ring's probably still up in there. It is. Sometimes don't go taking compressed air to this orifice until you account for all your parts. Make sure you get that O-ring out of there before you put compressed air up in there, or you'll blow that thing out, you'll lose it, and then you're screwed. Okay, after you've cleaned out the fuel screw passage and you're ready to put everything back in, you take your fuel screw, slide on the spring, slide on the washer, and then your O-ring. Don't get that mixed up. You do not want your O-ring against the spring. Your spring will chew it up. And then after you get that assembly put together, slide that whole thing into the bore. Screw it in until it lightly seats, and then back out to that previous point where you had it before, which in my case was 1 1/2. And then you're done. Now a lot of times you'll see posts on the internet about guys saying that their choke lever is loose. It won't stay in place. It'll turn on by itself while they're riding. That's because most of the time this screw right here is loose. This screw holds this bracket on, and this choke lever has 3 detents here. There's a little tit on this lever that falls into these holes here, and that's where your detents are that you feel. When this bracket is loose, this thing flops around, and a lot of times you'll read people that they get their choke lever positions mixed up. They think on is off and off is on, and then they try and figure out why their bike is running so bad. Well, it tells you right here on the choke lever which way the choke is on if you look at it. Choke is on when the lever's all the way up. It's half when it's halfway position, and down is all the way off. Sometimes you get a popping on decel. The first things you want to check is your air screw, your fuel screw, to make sure that it's not, that patch is not plugged up. And you want to check the condition of that O-ring. You want to make sure your pilot jet is not too lean. You want to make sure your fuel screw is adjusted properly. If none of those take care of the popping, the next thing you want to check is this air cutoff valve. Inside of here, you have a diaphragm, a spring, and a small O-ring right under here. You want to check for a damaged O-ring, and you want to check that diaphragm to see if it's got any pinholes in it. There's the little O-ring, spring, and the diaphragm. If I get that little booger out of there. You want to clean out these passages. Take this O-ring off first, clean out this passage. Make sure you put the O-ring back. And then this diaphragm here, you want to check it over real good for pinholes. And the way you can do that is to get it in some good light and kind of stretch it. Not real hard, just stretch it and look for pinholes. And then put it back. After you get it all put back together, see if you still have the popping on decel. Next, I'm going to try to show how to set the float level. To get the bowl off, you take off these 3 screws here. You can see I've replaced mine, the Phillips head, with these 4 millimeter by 16 millimeter cap screws. They work a whole lot better, and it's a lot easier to use an Allen wrench to get this bowl off in the field rather than trying to get to those Phillips head. And once you get the bowl off, there's your O-ring. Okay, this is your slosh baffle. A lot of times people will take your bowl off and find this laying in the bottom of the bowl. And if this comes off and can get hung up in here and prevent this float from working properly, I've told a lot of people to bend these little fingers right here. Either heat it up in a hot cup of water to soften these up so you can bend them in, or you can use, I've used a lighter before, but you have to be real careful when you heat these. Heat them up, bend them in a little bit so these things will grip this float tower a little better and it won't come off. I had to pull mine off. That took quite a little pressure to pull that off there. I've got mine on there pretty good. This here, you see an extra piece of hose on the main jet here. I put that on there just to extend the main jet's reach into the bowl. Try and help with the stumbling and stuttering over rough terrain. It's just a 10 millimeter or so length of fuel hose, scarfed at one end, and I've pushed half of it onto the edge of the, actually it's the slow jet. But there's your slow jet, your pilot jet. This is your main jet. This is your float. Your float valve or inlet needle is right there. It hangs from this float. Okay, when setting the float level, you want to hold your carb like this. See how the float pendulum's on its pin? What you want to do is you want to rotate this until that float just closes this float valve right here, but it doesn't compress that little tit in the end of it. Because see, it's spring loaded. You don't want it to compress that. So rotate it until it just seats, and then take your scale, measure from the float bowl mating surface in line with the main jet, this, measure up to the flat bottom edge of that float. That's your minimum spec setting. When you set your max drop, this right here is the max drop stop tab. You bend that so that it contacts this tower and the floats travel sooner. And that prevents your float from dropping too much. From the factory, they come at like 25 millimeters drop. And that's way too much. That allows the float to flop back and forth between stops on rough terrain and can cause a stumble over rough terrain, jumps, G-outs, stuff like that. This is the XR's only choke plate. You notice instead of a backfire flap, it's got these two holes. And installing one of these backfire choke plates like this from XR's only, it can alter the fuel-air ratio that the carb gets when starting. So your normal starting routine may change just a little bit over that of the stock plate, because the stock plate, when you put it in full choke, it's not getting as much airflow through it at all compared to what this is getting. So it changes your starting fuel air mix, so you have to change your starting routine just a little bit. This is your fuel drain screw. A lot of people complain that they let their bike sit a couple of weeks. They put it up in the garage and it started just fine a couple of weeks ago, but they pull it out the next, a couple of weeks later and try and start it, and it won't start. That's because the fuel and bowl, when it sits in there for very long, it can go stale, and it just won't create a very good mixture for starting. So open this drain bowl screw. It'll come out through the line that's connected to there and drain that float bowl, and turn your petcock on and let it flow for just a little bit to flush it out of there, and then close it and then try and restart. When my bike sits as little as a couple of weeks, that's the first thing I do before I even try to start it, is drain and flush that float bowl. Okay, changing the needle clip position. You have to take the slide out. You take these two screws out here. Something I want to talk about on these butterhead screws like this, when you're using a steel screwdriver against a steel screw, there's no friction between the two metals, and so they're really easy to strip out. A lot of things I like, sometimes I like I'll take some Comet and I'll coat my screwdriver tip and then use that on there, because that creates more friction between your screwdriver tip and the screw and doesn't let it slip, so you get more bite and there's less chance of you stripping that screw head out. Sometimes you've got one shot to get a screw out and you don't want to mess it up the first time. There's the lid. Take out your O-ring. You could probably leave it on there. Mine's stuck in there pretty good, so I'm going to leave it. And then take out this screw right here to remove the throttle drum. Yeah. Come out, there you go, bastard. And then this just slides out. Okay, and then you have your slide. Your slide will come right out. Okay, there. Now to get the needle out, it's down in there. there are 2 screws down in there, 2 Phillips head screws. They're small, and you bigger those heads up and you're screwed. So take you a long, thin Phillips screwdriver, go to the end of it, and some kind of abrasive material like Ajax or Comet. Stick it down in there and break those loose. Okay. Unscrew them. It's nice to have a magnetic screwdriver too. Pull that out of there, and then there's your needle. With the clip on it. I've got mine in clip number 2, second from the top. I like it that way for riding in Colorado. That way I can leave the needle where it's at and just change the main jet. But when you put this back in, if you'll notice, there's a hole right there in the bottom of the slide. That hole has to match up. It needs to stay clear. You don't want to block it by sticking it in the other direction. You can put it in like this. Put your screws back in, and then put it all back together. Okay, when you get ready to put this drum back in, after you get those screws in, slide your drum down in the carb. Don't forget this little shim, or it goes right down in there. And take your shift drum, or the throttle drum with the spring on it. Slide it in, get it started. Now your spring, this side will hook right here, and this side of the hook spring will hook on this tab, or this pole underneath there. And as you slide it in, and those springs engage, turn this throttle drum until those engage. Once they engage, then you're going to start feeling the torsion on that spring. And you rotate it back to your stop there. Push it the rest of the way in, and you're good to go. Line up your holes for your screw here. And tighten her down. Again, I use abrasive on that so it doesn't slip while I'm trying to tighten it. But it doesn't get a whole lot of torque, just snug it down, don't ham fist it. And then once you've got that done, you're ready to put the lid back on. And your screws, and then you're done. Trying to think of some other things I can talk about. Here you'll notice this big Allen head screw here. This is where the throttle cable bracket connects to the carb. I ended up having to tap my hole for that mount to the next size larger, and I went with a cap screw because it's the cap screws is a whole lot easier to get out in the field if you have to pull the car for some reason, and you can get to it with a ball driver works real good. And because these Phillips head, or the Phillips heads strip out real easy. Another thing, let's see. On the idle speed knob, a lot of people, when they take their Cubs apart, they take this thing out, and they don't measure this distance here before they take it out, and then when they go to put it back, they don't know where to set it for an idle speed. And this one, I've got mine set at right out about 17 millimeter, so that's a good starting point if you ever do that.